Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 128, and we're going to talk about the Asch Conformity Experiment, as well as discussing a meme I saw and the Hawk Tuah girl. Anyway, so the Asch experiment was conducted by this Polish psychologist, right? He was in the United States, but he was born in Poland, Solomon Asch. And it's this visual discrimination test, or at least that's the way he called it. I'm sure some of you might be familiar with it, but in any case, it's a kind of interesting experiment where 7 or 9 people are sitting at a table. They're shown cards with 4 lines on them. And they have 3 lines on the right and 1 line on the left. And you're supposed to say which of the lines on the right are the same length as the single line that's on the left. Now, even though there are 7 to 9 people at the table, only one of them is the test subject. Okay. Everyone else is in on it, right? They're part of the experiment. And so the one person, the test subject, comes in and he's generally like 5th position at the table. And so by the time he shares his answer, he's the 5th person, right? And so there are 4 answers before him, 4 to 7 answers before him, and then a couple people after him. Okay, so the experiment begins. Everyone's giving the correct answer. They see the line and they say the number of the line, which is the same length. And so the first 3, okay, everything is good. Everyone's getting it right. And then they all start saying the same wrong answer. And so then the test is to see how that person, the test subject, reacts. Does he go along with the wrong answer, or is he going to stand alone, right? Is that person going to say what they know clearly and obviously is the right answer? Okay. So it's kind of interesting, and there are videos all over YouTube that illustrate this, and this is how I saw it. I don't know how it came up as a suggestion, but I thought it was very relevant to what we're seeing in society today. And you might be interested in knowing that 37% of the time, the test subject went along with the wrong answer, right? And I have a feeling it's because when the answer is clearly wrong, right? So you have the 1 line on the left, and there are 3 lines on the right, and one of them kind of looks similar. And then there's one that's obviously correct, and there's one that's obviously wrong. And so probably those times when something is obviously wrong, the person is going to say, yeah, no, I can't go along with that. So 37% of the time, they went along with the crowd. The reasons they gave for going, so they had post-test interviews, exit interviews for the test subjects. And they were like, okay, so why do you go along with answers where clearly it was obvious that you knew they were wrong? There are videos of it, right, where they're videoing the person's facial expression, and you can hear it in their tone, in their facial expression, that they're like, well, this is kind of idiotic because they're clearly wrong, but whatever, I'll go along with it. And so some people go along with the wrong answer to avoid feeling different, right? Sometimes they get dirty looks, right? And so they don't, they don't appreciate it so much, right? And then they put a twist on the experiment where they give them a partner, right? So whereas everyone is going to give the same wrong answer, one person who's earlier, right? So the test subject is 5th position or 7th position. They're going to insert someone else in like the 3rd position. Okay. And so that person is going to give the correct answer when everyone else is agreeing with the wrong answer. When that happens, the test subject is more emboldened to give the correct answer as well. And so the number of wrong answers are 5%. right? So 37% they're unwilling to say the correct answer, and 5% of the time when there's a partner. And so the interesting observation is that the unanimity of the opposition, right, when everyone is saying the same wrong answer, it's a very powerful psychological influence. But when there's a partner, when there's someone else who agrees with you, disagreeing with everybody else, that power is vastly reduced. I wonder again if that 5% is, sort of margin of error, right? That maybe the person did see the lengths incorrectly themselves. I don't know. That's not really discussed in the videos that I saw anyway. So informational conformity is when someone is convinced by the information. Normative conformity is when you are afraid of being different. Another interesting twist is when the test subject shows up late, and so they're told that because they showed up late, they and didn't want to upset the trial, they have to write down their answers in secret. And so when no one else knows the answer that you give, there is 2/3 less conformity, right? They're more willing to give the correct answer, right? uh, so it's this weird phenomena where people deny what they see, submit to group pressure, right? And isn't that kind of what we see today? I mean, there are things which are obviously, I mean, at least for people like me, that are obviously wrong. And as someone who is neither left or right, red or blue, you can see it on both sides. And so you're kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? And I've been struggling with this for quite some time, right? When something is obviously, you know, wrong, how could you continue to maintain a certain belief? And you can do this with pretty much any recent phenomena, whether it's foreign policy or domestic policy or even medical policy, any of that kind of stuff. There is data which challenges what a lot of people are saying, but people then just go along. It's just kind of, it's just odd. It's just mind boggling. And I thought it was just simply, a character flaw on my part, and then hearing other people saying the same thing, then I was like, oh, okay, so I'm not alone. So what is really going on? And so this Asch experiment explains a little bit, right? It's not obviously a lot. It doesn't explain everything, right? Because there are a lot of other factors that need to be considered, such as your personality, your strength of will, your character, right? And, subheadings underneath that is your upbringing, right? Your relationship with figures of authority, all this other kind of stuff, where you are, how attractive you are, how unattractive you are, how socially awkward you are, all of these other things are subheadings within that personality, strength of will thing. Uh, Also, those some people might call it courage, courage to be alone, your conviction in just basically being who you are in the face of shame and social pressure. So there are lots of other things too, body language of everybody else, your own body language, do you feel threatened? Do you feel like, something adverse, something bad will happen? So there are all these other factors that I think you could probably take into consideration. How old is the test subject? How old are the other people in the room? We could go on, right? You can probably think of many other situations which would influence how the test subject would respond. So anyway, it's food for thought with all the craziness that's going on, where people are obviously ignoring divergent information which doesn't agree with what they already believe is true. People have called it confirmation bias. But I mean, when there is information out there which should cause you to pause and at least reconsider or at least leave other people alone, yeah, that doesn't happen. It's just kind of interesting. And there are other theories for that as well, but I'll just kind of leave it there. Very open-ended, help us to realize that there is something going on and people have explanations for it. But do they, answer everything that we can imagine? Possibly, maybe, depends. We're limited by our imagination. Now, I saw this meme. It says, liberals see racism where it does not exist, fabricate it when they can't find it, and ignore it when it is one of their own. So it said liberals see racism, but it's kind of everyone sees racism, okay? Uh, Conservatives, so-called, will see racism when the other side does it, right? Where they say, "Oh, equality for all," and so you're not treating these people fairly, and so therefore we have to hate you. And so they'll say, conservatives will say, "Well, see, that's discrimination right there." Right? So everyone sees racism, okay? And so everyone creates racial categories all of the time. As I said recently, right? We are constantly constructing race with a single characteristic, right? In this case, the ability to see racism. But because we're using only one characteristic to, more often than not, identify something which is far more complex, it is automatically doomed to fail because these are just generalizations. Okay, so everyone is doing it all. It's a reference point from which we begin a conversation, a learning experience, comparison, contrast, whatever. But we have to start with the generalization and we move towards specificity. And the more that you get into detail, the more you realize that two are not alike, right? So even though they are similar and on the surface, the more you understand, the more you dig down, there are differences. So we all see racism all of the time. And so really what we're looking at is nothing bad, right? What we're seeing is the process of making generalizations. And then when people make choices, it's an expression of preference, okay? It's an expression of preference. There's nothing wrong with that. Everyone has preferences, okay? The problem arises when you legislate into law certain preferences, and thereby in one fell swoop, you criminalize all other preferences. And so if you want to hire people who are, fantastically efficient and hardworking, then you're discriminating against lazy people, okay, to put it very simply, okay? And so your preferences then become illegal if all of a sudden you have to have quotas when it comes to gender and color, okay? And so this is the situation that we are encountering today, and which is why now people are saying things like liberals see racism where it doesn't exist. No, it exists everywhere. It's everywhere all of the time. We can't help but see with generalizations or racialization. To deny that is just simply hypocrisy. Take a more relevant example, the hawk Tuah girl, right? Which is very kind of interesting, like, how that becomes this sort of viral meme is kind of interesting. I think what helps is that she's kind of cute, right? Kind of attractive, although you might consider it vulgar and her behavior vulgar. I don't know what her parents would think. I don't know, whatever. But I think the fact that it's just so not the current dominant discourse, right? It's basically something that would be canceled in any school, anywhere, any government controlled environment, which is probably part of the reason why it's embraced. But really, no one really knows this person. She's just the hawk Tuah girl, right? So when people saw her, a category was constructed and people began to imagine what all of the details of this individual was based on one thing, Okay. And so that is race making. That is racialization. Are you like this? All right. And I started seeing memes about, people who want a girl like that. Well, what is a girl like that? That's a racial category. Okay. You can't get away from it, but it's not necessarily negative. I guess it all depends on your morality, your sensibility, your sense of conduct and etiquette and all this other kind of stuff. What is socially acceptable? What is vulgar? All of that influences, right? And so the same racial category has many different perceptions. Okay, to deny that this is true is hypocrisy, right? You're going to say this is okay, you have a problem. No, this is vulgar, you have a problem. It's basically that, right? And once you have the strength of legislation behind you, now you basically can go, you have the power and the conviction and the authority of law. Now you can pretty much go after anyone, right? So you got MAGA, Trumpers, insurrectionists, people who are anti-Israel or pro-Palestine. Every time we use an expression, one of these expressions, we are tapping into a racialization, a partial understanding of a large, diverse group of people. And once we, remain superficial in our understanding, then it's very, very easy to write legislation to condemn them all, to conduct genocide. That's how it happens, right? As long as you remain unthinking and superficial and afraid to go against the crowd, right? You want to conform to everything else. Well, then that's how we get things like genocide or war, where little children are being killed and people are like, well, they were Russian, so it doesn't matter. So the subjectivity of seeing racism, it's real. It's real, but it's not significant. What makes it significant, as I said before, is the ability to write legislation, therefore criminalizing all alternative interpretations of that racialization. Right. So think about it. And you might object by me saying it's not a big deal, all this racism, because it's not. And I posted it elsewhere. I've said it before, but Rosa Parks, right? If there was very little government interference in our lives, no one would know who Rosa Parks was, because when that bus company says, oh, you colored people have to give up their seat. If a white person wants their seat, you got to go to the back of the bus. Yeah, okay. Well, then she doesn't have to ride that bus, right? She can ride another bus company's bus, maybe a black owned bus company, and so that's it. And so the bus company that would have required her to give up her seat would realize this and never have said it in the first place. Do you understand what I mean? So basically, you can discriminate in any way that you want, but you have to live with the consequences. You cannot have laws erasing the cost of your discrimination. I talked about cost of discrimination earlier, but that's all it is. Discrimination, arbitrary discrimination, is so expensive that no one would ever do it unless they had the protection of law, which erases those costs of discrimination. So racism is real everywhere, all of the time, and that's why it's not a big deal. Okay. And this is why having a very strong, powerful, uh, you know, inf- lobbyist prone government is very, very bad for a free society. That's it for today. I'll talk to you guys soon.